Hi everybody! Today we're going to be working in this issue of Colouring Heaven. This is the Fairy Special by Janna Prosvirina. Not quite sure how to pronounce her name, but it is there. That's the artist for this issue. And originally this video is going to be showing you how I go about colouring hair on my ladies. So I picked one of my works in progress from this magazine. I do have two in here. So I'll show you a picture here of what it looked like originally before I started working on it. And I went ahead and I started working on those flowers at the bottom. As you can see, I've coloured in the flowers at the bottom. And the reason this picture went into my works in progress pile, I put it aside, was because I was using pastel colours. I was actually using the Astra Pastelo pencils on there. And I'm really not one for using pastel colours. It really doesn't gel with me at all. So that's why it went to the side. I couldn't get on with it. So today I thought I'd try and work on that flower at the bottom at first, to try and get that looking a bit more like something that I would actually colour. And I did at first have a little bit of a struggle with that, but I think now it's ended up looking quite nice. So I thought you guys might be interested in seeing how I worked on that flower today, what I've ended up with and how I got there. And I'll leave my little hair demonstration for a little bit later. So I'll show you the lady that we are working on today. There we go, it's this lady here. And you can see how I've changed these flowers quite dramatically here at the bottom. So I'll zoom us in so we can see in a little bit more detail there. So I've zoomed us on into the flowers there, and you can see they have changed quite a lot. Originally my plan was to erase all the pencil colouring that I'd done and then make the flowers a darker colour, a more desaturated colour, one that I would normally colour flowers in. But I did run into a few little problems. I wanted to erase all the pencil colouring and then go over the top with a marker. I chose blue to go over the top. And I figured that once I'd erase as much of this pencil as I could, I'd be able to go over the top with the marker and have a fresh clean slate to be starting on shading on top of that marker. But as you can see here on these petals, these were the ones that I did actually colour. These ones were still blank here, so those have just got a coat of marker. But these ones here, I erased as much of the colour as I could, just with the normal eraser. I don't have an electric eraser, that would have been quite handy in this situation. But as I don't actually have one, I had to work with what I had. And this was the state we got into with erasing the colouring. And I thought, well, maybe that's enough. Maybe I can just go over it with the marker. And the marker I chose to go over it with was this one. This is a Hoo-Hoo B250 light blue. And I went over the colouring, but as you can see, it wasn't really very successful. We do still have that pink showing through underneath, which was a little bit of a downer because I wanted to have a blue flower. But I thought rather than trying to cover that, it would have been really fiddly to try and collage in here. And I really wasn't in the mood to be getting out the gouache paint. I really didn't want to be working with gouache paint on this one, on this paper. So I decided to try and work with the colours that what I had going on there. And I think what we've got going on here is working quite nicely. It's looking pretty vintage, or to my mind at least, it does remind me of kind of vintage, desaturated colours. And especially with the lady's hairstyle, if I can move her down a little bit there, with these rolls of hair on top of her head, she's reminding me of 1940s kind of Victory Roll style hairstyles. It's probably nothing like it in actual real life, but yeah, that's what it was reminding me of. So maybe I thought I could go with those kind of subdued colours. I'm not sure about you guys, but to me that looks like pretty vintage colours, especially considering this blue flower here. I have tried a different kind of approach on the pink one, which I think hasn't worked as well, but I will show you both different methods that I was using here. So originally, as I still had this pencil on my desk from the last tutorial where I did the feathers, I first of all started shading over the top of this pink with the Midnight Blue Arteza pencil. This is A515. I'll try and put all the numbers and colours down in the description. But first of all, I started colouring with this A515 to maybe see if I could cover that pink. And yeah, it wasn't it wasn't super successful. You could see the pink still peeping through in the little kind of the tooth of the paper, shall I say. And to cover that pink entirely, I would have had to really press down with the pencil and have really burnished paper, and that really wasn't what I was planning on doing. So instead, once I'd gone ahead and added a little bit of shading with this kind of midnight blue, I'll just do this little bit of a leaf here for an example, maybe this shadow under here, because I was shading all the shadowy areas with this midnight blue, hoping that it would cover that pink. But yeah, no, these pencils, they do tend to be pretty hard to to erase. Maybe it was because I'd been a bit heavy-handed there. Or maybe it is the actual pencils, the Astra Pastelo pencils. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I think they're Polish kind of pencils. And the colours are really pretty. It's just not something that I tend to use super much. There we are. That's a little bit of shading with that midnight blue there. And then I thought, instead of fighting against that pink, I would maybe play up to it, bring in the pink as well. And I pulled out another couple of Arteza pencils. This is Plum Purple. It looks like that number is A406. And I also have Fuschia there. That's A404. And I was going in with the darker one. This is the Plum Purple. I'm kind of blending into that blue to give it a kind of a purpley tone to it. And bring in the pink. Instead of trying to hide the pink, bringing that pink in to the actual colour scheme, which seems to be another rather patriotic colour scheme. The red, white and blue seem to be going on here as well. But it was working. Yeah, I think it's an improvement. I think it's working, and definitely something I could go for rather than the pastel kind of tone with the flowers. This is the fuchsia pink, and I'm kind of blending out that dark pink colour into the lighter pink colour. So the transition isn't as harsh there. We're not exactly covering the pink that's kind of still coming through underneath. We're working with it and bringing it into our little flower there. That was the fuchsia pink. And around the very edges of the flowers, I'm not sure if that will be showing up on the camera, maybe if I move up a little bit, around the edges of the flower I was bringing in the Cobalt Turquoise. This is a Castle Arts Gold. I think the number is 048 or 043. I will find that out and write it in the description, but 048 I think GP. And I was going just around the very edges with that to bring in a little bit of that brighter blue colour. So any kind of brighter blue colour. I'm just kind of giving you guys the idea of how I coped with covering that pastel pink that really, really isn't me at all. I'm turning the flower into something I would probably enjoy colouring. And of course the pink and the blue working together are giving a kind of purpley colour, and purple is my favourite colour, so yeah, I can work with that. With the, this one is Plum Purple, I'm just adding in a few little touches of colour. Of course, flowers are natural, so they're not perfect. They have little dashes of colour sometimes. If you have a multicoloured flower with a different colour on the edge of the petals, then the colour does kind of come forward down the flower sometimes. Hopefully that makes sense. You can actually see what I'm doing anyways. Little kind of bits of colour on the edges of the petal coming down into the centre. And then once I'd done that, I was going over the whole thing with the Polychromos white. Kind of blending those colours together. And I was kind of in two minds whether to go over the actual line art of this flower with the white gel pen to try and make that look a little bit more delicate. But I think in the end I decided against it. Because the colours are slightly darker, the flower isn't that transparent, so I figured that, yeah, we can get away with just leaving the line art there. Maybe I'll decide against that in the future and actually go over it with a gel pen, but for now the idea is to leave the flower as is once we've blended all these colours. And just add my usual white gel pen highlights. Just for fun, because it is something that I do like to do, especially on these more stylised, kind of not so realistic flowers. And in the very, very dark shadows of these flowers, I was actually bringing in the black. I suppose a dark purple could maybe work as well, but to avoid bringing in many more colours, I was just adding the very, very dark shadows with the black Polychromos. My light, I've decided, is coming from the left there, because the fairy does have a very, very slightly three-quarter face. So yeah, that's the side I like to bring in. My light is to the side with the most of the face is facing the light. I'll just go ahead and do this petal down here. Exactly the same. This one is the plum purple. Just again to show how I was getting what I think is a quite nice effect with this flower. As I said, it hasn't worked as well on the pink, but I will go ahead and show you how I did that anyways. I think the marker I picked to go over the pink was a little bit too dark, so using a lighter pink, I think a much lighter pink would work a lot better with that. Having the blues show up on top of it a lot better. But we live and learn. The whole point is the learning process, trying things and experimenting. So feel free to try any markers, or even just with pencils on white paper. That would be another little thing to try, just using these colours on top of the white paper to see what kind of effect you can get going on. But I thought the effect was working quite nicely, and it was blending out that pink that we still had coming through our marker there. You can still see some of the original kind of lines, like these little kind of marks on the edges of the petals, and if you can, see those. I'm working with those and bringing those back in. Again, doing those little dashes onto the actual petals, which I think makes them look a little bit more natural. I'll just blend that with the white pencil. Of course, it's optional. Blending is optional. As with any of my videos, most of it is completely optional, especially the white gel pen. That's just something that I like to do quite a lot, so yeah. The main point is to give you the actual idea of shading on top of the blue with the pink, and it's giving quite a nice effect. Well, I think it is. Just moving on to another petal here, and because the colour pink that we've chosen is fairly similar to this colour pink that we can see coming through here, this kind of method is working on the petals that don't have any of that in the background, and giving it the same kind of effect as this petal here. That one didn't have any actual colouring on it, but using the same method as we've done on the other petals, that one looks as if it blends in. It looks as if it's exactly the same. I'll add in a little bit of shadow behind this pink flower here, because as I said, my light is coming from that side, so it would have a little bit of shadow coming there. And on the insides of the flower here, where all the petals kind of bunched together in the middle coming into the centre, that's where most of the shadows would be. So that's where we put our shading, with the outside of the petals being lighter, just to give a kind of sense of form to the flower, to show that there are loads of petals kind of bunched together. They're all making shadows onto each other there. But I digress. We're back to this petal here, showing that we can get the same kind of effect, and the petals do blend in, even if they don't have the original colouring still underneath them. It will look pretty much the same if we use the same kind of method, because the pink we've chosen is fairly similar. It's slightly darker, but fairly similar to that pink that we actually have. It's sort of staining there. I'm not sure if it is staining the page or if I just couldn't erase it well enough. The pencils were also quite waxy, those Astra Pastelo pencils, so I did have trouble going over them with the marker. The marker was resisting a little bit going over that pencil. I'm not sure if we can see on these leaves, these tiny leaves here. Yeah, there's a bit of resisting going on there with those pencils. Right, blending out with the fuchsia pink there slightly. And on the edges of the petals, it's cobalt turquoise or any kind of light blue really. And as I said, I think this kind of colour the way I've got it working here is looking pretty vintage. So I'm probably going to try and go with a kind of 1940s sort of vintage look with the colours. Maybe do a sort of ochre, chalk pastel maybe background to give that sort of paper fading sort of look to it. That's the plan anyways. As always, I went in with not much of a plan, and this is kind of developed because of the way this flower was behaving when I tried to erase those colours there. And I think we're heading more into a sort of 1940s sort of style. There we go. I'll just add a little bit of the plum purple, bring in a little bit of that. Adding in some of those lines around the edges of the flower. That's what I originally had, and you can still see through the marker that we do still have that going on a little bit. So I'm bringing that in to make this petal look the same as all the others. I'm working with it rather than trying even harder to erase what we already had. And again, a few little bits of white gel pen just for fun around the edges. Not so much under here because that's where we will have our shadows happening there. Maybe around a few little bits of these folds in the petal. And again, for the darkest shadows, we can come in with the black. And hopefully this is of interest to you guys. I was quite interested to see how this flower would actually work with coming away from that kind of pastel look I had going on, which was pretty. I will say it was pretty, but really not me, not something I would want to carry on with. So changing it into something more my style and working with what we actually had there. So there we go. That is a petal that wasn't actually coloured in. And we can see, just adding in my little dashes down the petal, we can see that you can't really tell the difference between the petal that wasn't coloured and the petals here that were coloured. There's not much of a difference, maybe a little tiny bit if you zoom right in, but not much of a difference there. So I was quite happy with how that was going. And being me, I decided to experiment a little bit and colour in this flower here pink and see if I could kind of do the reverse with the flower being pink and shading with the blue. And I don't think this one has worked particularly well. I'll still keep going with it because I was kind of committed once I actually went ahead with putting my marker down. But the marker I did actually put down onto that one is number 7 Cosmos, that one there. This one is from the Touch Cool markers. And I think this kind of pink is, although it's desaturated, which is why I picked it up, it's kind of a dusty sort of pink, going with that vintage sort of idea that I think I'm going to be going with. I think it is slightly dark. It could do with a lighter pink, I think, to make this kind of reversal of the colours to make that actually work. But for this one, I was shading, as we did over here, I was shading with the Midnight Blue first, on top of the pink. And we're not getting as much of that purple colour as I really hoped that we would here. Maybe I should try coming in with that plum purple again. I think on these pieces here I just came in with the turquoise blue to fade out this blue here, but maybe if I came in with the pink. It's all about experimenting. So this is plum purple. Trying to blend out that blue a little bit. Going over what we've already done to take it into the kind of purple sort of territory. Still not working super well, but I was coming in with this turquoise blue. So yeah, I don't think that's working quite as well as when I was just using the Midnight Blue. So what I was doing originally, as I said, I was just coming in with that Midnight Blue, laying in the shadow areas. We would have a shadow there underneath these petals. Those are covering this one here, so we'd have a little bit of shadow. And wherever there was these folds maybe. Then I was just blending out the dark blue with the light blue. This is the Cobalt Turquoise. But yeah, any pencils with the dark blue and the light blue, these are the ones that I found that kind of did the job. So that's what I was sticking with. It didn't really quite work bringing in the pink here. Down the bottom, I don't think, trying to bring in that purpley colour. That hasn't worked quite as well as I would have hoped it would, but worth an experiment. Always worth an experiment. And then I was bringing in the plum purple around the edges of these petals. And yeah, I'm definitely thinking this marker was a bit the wrong choice, but yeah, I'm committed now, so I'll work with it. Maybe I should have gone for a more kind of salmony shade of pink, because this is kind of a salmony pink here, this Cosmos marker. But these were the pinks I was using originally on the blue flower, and I just thought, yeah, go for it, what the heck. We'll see what happens. I'll just blend all that in with the white as I was doing. And these petals are working, I think, slightly better than the original ones, maybe because the marker has actually been drying for a while now, and these are the Touch Cool markers, so they're fairly cheap markers, but that is working. Yeah, that seems to be working. Okay, actually, I think I'd rather stick with the blues instead of bringing in the pink into that middle, but it's working okay, I think. Definitely better now that the marker has actually dried, so there's a tip. Let the marker completely dry for maybe half an hour or so. But the general idea, yep, the same kind of thing I was doing with the blue flower. I just wanted to test if it would work with pink as a base rather than the blue, and we've got something going on. I don't think it works quite as well as the blue. Still an interesting little kind of way to do a flower, I'm hoping. You guys might find it interesting. I think it works quite well. Almost the same as the last video with the multicolored pencil. It's giving that same kind of effect, I think. Maybe that's why I came up with the idea, but yeah. That's the general idea. So yeah, I just thought you guys, might be a little bit interested in seeing how I went about actually sort of fixing these flowers. Not that they really needed fixing, I just wanted to change the colours. I didn't really, I really didn't want to go ahead and carry on with the pastel colours because it's really not my jam at all. So yeah, the original thought was to change it into a more darker, more kind of goth sort of style, to be the complete opposite. But when I couldn't go over this pink with the blue, then plans sort of changed, and that's the way I work, really. Just sort of roll with what happens, work with it. But I'm thinking this way is working pretty well, yeah. This flower isn't turning out as bad as I thought it might, actually. I could have stuck with the same sort of blue, I suppose, but I wanted just to try, see if we could work with the same colours, but having pink as the background, and I don't think it's worked too badly. I do prefer this blue here, but yeah, I'm quite happy with how that is turning out there. So I'll zoom us out again so we can see the whole picture. There we are with our lady zoomed back out again. So we can see the effects of both these flowers along with the lady in the background. I've got to say I'm slightly more happy with this one here, but me being the experimental me decided to try the pink in the background, which has worked but not as well as the blue. I'm going to go ahead and keep with a kind of vintage colour scheme, I think. As I said, this lady's hairstyle does remind me of a kind of vintage 1940s style, so I'll try and keep with the vintage colours, kind of desaturated colouring going on there. But yeah, hopefully that was a little bit interesting for you guys today. I thought you guys might like to see how I was coping with this this pencil not erasing properly and actually showing through the marker, so we had to work with what we actually had. Of course, there was the option of coming in with acrylic markers or the gouache paints, but I thought I'd try and go ahead with the pencils to see if we could work with that with the pencils, and I think it has actually worked. And should look pretty good when the whole picture is actually done, I think. I'll stick to the desaturated colours as I said, but yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed watching and following along as I did figure out how to actually go ahead adapting these flowers here. If you have enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Take care everyone, and I'll see you in future videos. Bye.